Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me as we continue the Bible study series here. And we're going to go over the four Gospels. And right now we're in the Gospel of Matthew, who, as you'll find out, he was a publican, which is he was a tax collector. And at the time, the tax collectors were so corrupt. It was such a corrupt profession that just being a tax collector, you were considered a sinner. Every single tax collector was known for pocketing a lot of the taxes, giving people extra taxes, all kinds of fraudulent schemes that they were doing to overtax people and to pocket a lot of the money. So right now we're in chapter 7, and we're going to continue with chapter 7, where it begins with Jesus telling us not to judge others, or we will be judged. And so we're talking about warnings. Jesus is giving warnings, and so he begins by saying to judge not. And so I'm going to read from King James Version. It says, "For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged." And Jesus says, "What you do to others will be done back to you." And then if you look at verse 3, in verse 3, Jesus says, "Beholdest the spot that is in thy brother's eye, but not the beam that is in thine own eye." And Jesus instructs us to figure out what we are doing wrong and how we can improve, so that we will be in a better position to see clearly and then help others. And so Jesus is warning against hypocrisy. And because Jesus warns of hypocrisy, judging others without first judging and improving ourselves is not a good thing to do, because we often require serious improvement ourselves. So hypocrisy, talking the talk but not walking the walk, has no place in Christ. So Jesus had two sets of teachings. A public set of teachings that he taught the public in parables, and then he also had a private set of teachings that he only that were only available for the disciples, the apostles. And you'll see later where Jesus does teach them things in private that he doesn't teach the public, and he explains why. And so if you look at chapter 7, verse 6, verse 6 is a message to teachers and people on a path of spiritual development who have acquired some divine esoteric knowledge or psychic abilities. Jesus says, "Give not that which is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and then turn on you to hurt you." And so Jesus taught in parables often when he was teaching the public. And then later he would show, you'll see where, I'll show you where Jesus explains why. And it's because he has two sets of teachings, as I was just explaining, a public set and a private set. So the public set of teachings that were primarily in the form of parables, and then a second secret set of teachings only given to disciples, particularly the 12 apostles, but I'm sure that there were other times where other disciples were also present in addition to the 12 apostles, but they were the primary ones. And they weren't all together all the time. Different times there were different ones together. And I'll show you later where Jesus explains why he doesn't give the deeper teachings publicly. And it's because he doesn't want to open the eyes of everyone or to save everyone, but rather those chosen and blessed by God, the poor, the humble, the loving, the peacemakers. But the others, the rich, the hateful, the warmongers, those who oppress the weak, they are all doomed to punishment. These are the dogs, the swine. So I'll try to explain some of the parables that Jesus doesn't explain. Then, of course, the Rosicrucians don't make everything public either. And you know, Rosicrucian is Gnostic Christian, and Rosicrucians have certain higher teachings that are never revealed publicly, but only to individuals who have developed spiritually and are ready, just like Jesus did. And so Jesus is saying, keep certain things from certain people. Don't make it public. And of course, you'll see later where Jesus teaches the parables and he explains them to the apostles, more the meaning of them in private. But he doesn't explain the meaning of the parables to the public. But later we're going to see where Jesus instructs the disciples to keep other secrets, like regarding his identity, for example, which is to suggest that keeping secrets in and of itself is not bad. It depends on what it is and why it's being kept secret. Then if you look at verse 7 of chapter 7 of the book of Matthew, verse 7 says, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you." A popular verse in modern free and accepted Masonry, which includes certain Bible passages and stories. Sadly, most Freemasons today never bother to read the Bible that's given to them after the third degree, not even once. So in verse 13, you'll see where Jesus explains to be a leader, not a follower, more or less. So in verse 13, you look at chapter 7, verse 13. Jesus says, "Enter in at the narrow gate, or the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in there." So what is Jesus saying? If you are one of the confused type who doesn't know what to do, so you look around and see what most other people are doing or what the majority of people are doing, and then follow along or figure out who to follow along with. Then you enter in to the wide, broad gate of destruction. So Jesus calls for his followers to be leaders and independent thinkers, just like he and John were. And so if you look at chapter 7, verse 22, in verse 22, Verse 22 says, you will know people by their fruits, which is to say their actions, not by what they speak or what they say, out of their mouth. And then if you look at verse 21, I don't know why we want to go back to 21, but we'll go back to verse 21. Sometimes I go back, but usually not. Verse 21, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter into heaven. So there are people who think that they're saved and born again, but they're not. And at the end of chapter 7, Jesus explains that his people are those who live by his teachings and example, not those who profess him with their mouth by saying that they're Christian or that they're born again or that they're saved. So we're going to move into chapter 8. And in chapter 8, we'll talk a little bit more about Jesus and secrecy. And so chapter 8 begins with Jesus coming down the mountain, and great multitudes of people followed him, and he heals a man who's plagued by leprosy. And if you look at chapter 8, verse 4 of the book of Matthew, and verse 4, Jesus tells the man he healed of leprosy to keep it secret. And Jesus saith unto him, tell no man. Now, Jesus didn't always heal people by touching them physically. He heals the centurion's servant. And if you look at verse 13, in verse 13, verse 13 says, Jesus said unto the centurion, go thy way, as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed. The centurion's servant was healed. And again, the prophet Elijah is mentioned. Elijah is from the Old Testament. The old prophet Elijah from the Old Testament is mentioned again in verse 17. If you look at verse 17, verse 17 says, Jesus says that he's fulfilling the prophecies of Elijah, prophet Elijah. So again, we keep going back to John the Baptist and Elijah, and we're going to talk more about that. And so now you'll see where Jesus grows tired of being among the thousands and thousands of people that the Bible constantly refers to as the multitude or the multitudes of people. And that's because there's so many people. And he seeks solitude for he and his closest disciples, particularly known as the apostles. But sometimes I'm sure there was other disciples as well that would be present. And if you look at verse 18, in verse 18, it says, when Jesus saw great multitudes around him, he gave commandment to depart to the other side of the water. And Jesus, if you look at verse 20, in verse 20, verse 20 says, the foxes have holes and the birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And so who's the Son of Man? you know, this tells us who the Son of Man is because Jesus referred to himself just now as the Son of Man. So the next time you see a homeless person, remember Jesus had no place to sleep in verse 20. And if you look at verse 26, in verse 26, Jesus rebukes the wind and the sea and causes the storm to end just by exercising control over the weather. Today, man tries to control the weather using weather-modifying technology in sin and great error, stepping on Jesus's toes, if you will. Starting all of these man-made fires, for example. Now, these people are wrestling with God, and they're not going to win. But Jesus could control the weather with divine power, not by using demonic man-made technology as a part of some land grab. And then if chapter 8 ends in a very strange way, Jesus goes to the country of the Gergesenes and casts demons out of two men who were possessed. And they had a bunch of demons in them. And Jesus commands the demons and allows them to enter a herd of pigs, and then the pigs run into the sea and they die. They all die. And you would think that the townspeople would rejoice and be happy about that, but they did not rejoice. They were pretty upset with Jesus, and they confronted him and asked him to leave their town, which I find very, very strange, because most people would ask Jesus to stay, not leave, because of all of the help he provided people through his miraculous abilities, like controlling weather, for example, and healing and stuff. So we're going to get into chapter 9, and we're going to start with verse 1, at the beginning of chapter 9. Verse 1 begins by saying Jesus entered into a ship and passed over, and then and came into his own city. Now it's very odd because the only kind of ship that passes overhead is a spaceship, also known as a UFO. Now, before you say, Gabriel, that's it, you're crazy, and then you take off and leave, remember that, number one, I'm just reading the Bible, so if you don't like what I'm saying, it's the Bible that you don't like. My second point is, let's remember that in the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, we went over this already. The writer makes it clear that Jesus is not fully human, because he was born of a mother and a mysterious Holy Spirit. And then some people say that Jesus' father was Archangel Gabriel, that somehow Gabriel caused Mary to become pregnant, not necessarily by a physical union, but you're going to see later where these beings were described as coming up and down from the sky or heaven. So in chapter 9, Jesus heals two blind men. And if you look at verse 30, again, in verse 30, Jesus asks for secrecy, where Jesus says, and their eyes were opened, and Jesus charged them, saying, see that no man know it. And chapter 9 ends with verses 36 through 38. Where Jesus saw the multitudes and was moved with compassion because they were scattered abroad, as though as sheep having no shepherd. So they were like scattered sheep. And it says, "Pray therefore that the Lord will send forth laborers unto his harvest." And I say, is it not so today that people are like lost sheep without a shepherd, worshiping a dead, crucified Christ on the cross rather than a living shepherd? Let us therefore be the laborers to help lead the lost sheep to the living shepherd, Jesus Christ. And so next week we're going to continue with chapter 10. And next week I'm going to kick this series into high gear rather than doing around 25 minutes or so. I'm going to start creating longer episodes around 45 minutes, maybe about twice as long. Because I'm eager to get through the four Gospels, because after we finish the four Gospels, I'm going to begin a new series that I'm happy to announce today. And we're going to be going over the Nag Hammadi Essene Bible scriptures, which are Gnostic secret Gospels, like the Book of Melchizedek, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, for example. So you can look forward to that, and hopefully I can. Last time I tried showing a book, I didn't do a very good job of it, but I'm going to try to make it so you guys can see this now. This is what we're going to go over. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.